through! I see the bit! Sergeant, pop the flare! Signal them! We are going home!
Sir, put the flare down!
Are you deaf, Lynn? That's the Army Corps of Engineers.
Now, drop the flare, or I will drop you!
The heat in the Syrian desert didn't just sit on you. It hunted you. It found every gap in your armor, every seam in your EOD suit, and pressed down like a physical weight. Staff Sergeant Maya Lynn checked her wrist monitor. Internal suit temp, 102. Sergeant Lynn, pick up the pace. Captain Miller's voice crackled over the comms, distorted by static and impatience. Intel says this cache is hot. We need to verify and clear before the sun goes down. Maya didn't speed up. She slowed down. Captain, with respect, she said, her voice calm, modulated by the disciplined breathing techniques she practiced daily. The ground disturbance ahead is inconsistent. The soil density has changed. It's not wind erosion. She knelt in the sand, 80 pounds of bomb suit protecting her vital organs, but cooking her alive. She swept the ground with her detector. It whined. It's a tunnel entrance, sir, but it's not concealed like a rat hole. It's engineered. Miller walked past her, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel. He wasn't wearing a suit, just standard plate carrier and helmet. He was an officer who led from the front, but often mistook recklessness for bravery. It's a Soviet-era bunker, Lynn. We saw the schematics. Just open the door. Maya stood up, the feeling in her gut, the spidey sense that every EOD tech developed or died without, was screaming. This wasn't a cache. It was a lure. Sir, I advise sending the bot first. The bot is slow. We are not. Miller reached the heavy steel blast door set into the side of the limestone cliff. It was rusted, half buried. He grabbed the handle. Captain, wait! Miller pulled. The door didn't explode. It opened smoothly, too smoothly for something that had supposedly been abandoned for 30 years. A rush of cool, stale air hit them, and then a sound. Not a click. A deep, resonant thud from deep inside the earth. Pressure plate? Miller asked, freezing. No, Maya said, realizing too late what the trap was. Seismic sensor. It's not a mine, sir. It's a structural collapse charge. The ground beneath them didn't just shake. It liquefied. The charges weren't at the door. They were in the ceiling of the tunnel entrance behind them. Boom! The world turned white, then gray, then black. Maya felt herself falling, sliding down a chute of concrete and rock, the roar of 1,000,000 tons of mountain burying the daylight forever. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a library. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a grave. Maya gasped, sucking in a lungful of dust. She coughed violently, the sound echoing in the confined space of her helmet. Her visor was cracked. The heads-up display, HUD, flickered red. System damage. Air filtration compromised. She ripped the helmet off. The air was thick, tasting of copper and pulverized ancient stone. Sound off! She rasped. Captain Miller, sound off! Nothing. She fumbled for her shoulder light. The beam cut through the dust, revealing a nightmare. They had fallen into a lower gallery. The tunnel they had entered was gone, replaced by a wall of jagged boulders. They were trapped. Lynn. The voice was weak, coming from her left. Maya scrambled over the debris. She found Captain Miller half buried under a slab of concrete. His face was a mask of blood and gray dust. I'm here, sir, Maya said, her hands moving automatically to check his vitals. Pulse rapid, skin clammy. My leg, Miller groaned through gritted teeth. I can't feel my foot. Maya shone the light down. The concrete slab had pinned his right leg. It wasn't crushed, but the angle was wrong. Even through the fabric of his trousers, she could tell the tibia had snapped. I'm going to leverage this off you, Maya said. She braced her back against the tunnel wall and pushed the slab with her legs. The EOD suit's exoskeleton gave her just enough mechanical advantage. Heave. The slab shifted. Miller screamed, a raw, tearing sound. Maya dragged him free. She quickly assessed the injury. It was a closed fracture, but severe. He was going into shock. "Radio," Miller gasped. "Call it in. Broken arrow." Maya reached for her radio. She toggled the frequency. Hiss. Static. And then, the sound that froze her blood. Not random static, but a rhythmic chopping interference pattern. Chop, 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 chop. She looked at the Geiger counter on her wrist. It was ticking. Not fast, but steady. "Sir," Maya said, looking into the darkness that stretched out before them. "We aren't just trapped. We're jammed, and we're not alone down here." Miller looked at her, his eyes losing focus as the pain took over. "What do you mean?" "The radiation levels," Maya whispered. "This isn't a weapons cache. It's a disposal site. And something is leaking." The dust had settled into a fine, choking powder that coated everything in spectral gray. Maya knelt beside Captain Miller. The adrenaline of the collapse was fading, replaced by the cold, mechanical necessity of trauma care. Miller was pale, his teeth gritted against the pain that radiated from his shattered tibia. The bone hadn't broken the skin, but the angle of his lower leg was grotesque, bent inward like a snapped branch. "I need you to bite down on this, sir," Maya said, handing him a roll of gauze. She didn't wait for his permission. She pulled the SAM splint, a malleable strip of aluminum and foam, from her medical kit. She molded it around his leg. "On 3, she whispered. 1, 2. She pulled traction on the leg. Miller screamed into the gauze, a muffled, guttural sound that died quickly in the heavy air of the tunnel. Maya worked fast, securing the splint with Coban wrap. Her hands were steady. This was engineering. Anatomy was just biological structure. Injury was just structural failure. Fix the strut. Support the load. "Morphine," Miller gasped, spitting out the gauze. "Hit me." Maya hesitated. "Sir, we have a radiation hazard. Morphine suppresses respiratory function. If the air quality drops—" "Give me the damn shot, Lynn," Miller snapped, his eyes wild. "I can't walk like this." Maya pulled the auto-injector. She jammed it into his thigh. Click. 5 minutes and you'll be floating, she said, checking her watch. "But you need to stay awake. We have to move." She stood up and walked a few paces away to give the morphine time to work. She raised her wrist, looking at the Geiger counter. The reading was steady but elevated. 0.5 sieverts. Not enough to kill them instantly, but enough to rot them slowly if they stayed here for a week. She unclipped her radio again. The silence from the surface was absolute. It shouldn't be. Even under 50 feet of rock, a low-frequency penetrator signal should get through. She adjusted the squelch. She switched to the emergency guard frequency. Kurr, 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 kurr. A rhythmic chopping noise cut through the static. Maya froze. She knew that sound. She had heard it during training exercises at Fort Irwin. It wasn't the chaotic static of rock interference. It wasn't the crude jamming of insurgent IED blockers. It was a Thor III dismounted jamming system, U.S. military issue. "No," she whispered. She tuned the frequency again. The jamming was broad spectrum, blanketing every channel used by their platoon. It was precise. It was powerful. And it was coming from above. "Command isn't trying to reach us," Maya realized, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. "They're making sure we can't reach them." She looked back at Miller. The captain's eyes were drooping, the morphine taking the edge off his agony. He was mumbling something about extraction protocols. He still believed the lie. He thought they were just trapped soldiers waiting for the cavalry. If she told him that, their own side was jamming them, he would break. He was a by-the-book officer. His worldview couldn't support the weight of betrayal. Status? Miller slurred, trying to sit up. Comms are still down, sir, Maya lied. Too much iron ore in the rock. We need to find a repeater or a vent shaft. She helped him stand. He groaned, putting his weight on his good leg and leaning heavily on her shoulder. The EOD suit was heavy, but Maya was used to carrying weight. She was a mule in Kevlar. Which way? Miller asked. Maya pointed her light down the tunnel, deeper into the dark. The Geiger counter clicked faster in that direction. That way, she said. The air draft is coming from the north. There has to be another exit. It was a half-truth. There was a draft, but it smelled of ozone and decay. They began to limp forward. The tunnel changed as they went deeper. The rough-hewn earth gave way to concrete supports. Old, Soviet-era concrete, crumbling and stained with moisture. Cables ran along the ceiling, thick black snakes that had been dormant for decades. This isn't an insurgent tunnel, Miller whispered, his tactical mind trying to make sense of the architecture through the haze of drugs. Look at the pour. Reinforced. This is a bunker. Watch your step, Maya said. She kicked something on the floor. It skittered away into the darkness with a metallic clatter. Maya shone her light on it. It was a gas mask, not a modern M50, but an old, gray Russian PMG mask. The rubber was cracked, and next to it, a bone, a human femur. Maya stopped. She swept the light further. The corridor ahead was littered with them. Rags of uniforms, rusted weapons, bones. It looked like a massacre that had been frozen in time. What happened here? Miller breathed. They didn't get out, Maya said, her grip tightening on her pistol. She looked at the gas mask again. It hadn't been removed. It had melted onto the skull. Whatever had killed these men, it had been hot. Thermal runaway, she thought. The nuke. We need to keep moving, Maya said, her voice hard. Don't look at them, Captain. Just look at my back. She stepped over the dead, leading her commander toward the thing that had killed them. The jamming signal buzzed in her ear, a constant reminder that the only thing more dangerous than the dead Russians ahead of them were the living Americans behind them. Maya froze. She didn't freeze because of fear. She froze because the vibration in the floor had changed. Behind her, Captain Miller was dragging his splinted leg, a rhythmic scuff drag that echoed loudly in the concrete tube. But underneath that sound, there was something else. A soft, wet slap, like bare feet on damp stone. Captain, Maya whispered, her voice barely audible over the comms loop. Stop! Miller halted, leaning heavily against the wall. What is it, Lynn? Did you find a way out? Cut your light, Maya ordered. Sergeant, I can't see a damn thing without... Cut it! She reached back and physically covered his shoulder lamp. She switched off her own. Absolute darkness swallowed them, the kind of darkness that felt heavy, like water filling the lungs. Maya held her breath. She closed her eyes, letting her hearing expand to fill the void. Scuff drag. That was Miller shifting his weight. Hiss. That was the air filtration in her helmet. Then she heard it. Click. It wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of a pebble being kicked. Ahead of them, maybe 10 meters. We aren't alone, Maya breathed. She unholstered her M9 Beretta. The friction of the polymer holster sounded like a scream in the silence. She knew she couldn't shoot. The tunnel walls were hardened concrete. A bullet would ricochet, and in this confined space, it would likely hit Miller or herself. She sensed the movement before she heard it. A displacement of air, a rush of scent, unwashed sweat, and old tobacco. "Down!" Maya screamed, shoving Miller back. She didn't drop. She lunged forward, using the 80 pounds of her EOD suit as a battering ram. She collided with something solid but yielding, a human body. They crashed onto the floor. Maya was on top, but her opponent was fast, wiry, and terrifyingly strong. A spark of metal on metal flashed in the dark. Shing, a knife. The blade slashed across Maya's chest plate. The ceramic insert caught the steel, saving her heart, but the force of the blow rattled her teeth. The attacker didn't panic. He moved like water, sliding out from under her bulk. He kicked her, hard, right in the faceplate of her helmet. The reinforced glass cracked but held. Maya rolled, scrambling to her knees. The suit, designed to stop shrapnel, was a liability in a wrestling match. She was a turtle fighting a snake. She fumbled for her tactical light, activating the strobe function. Flash, flash, flash. The tunnel exploded into a disorienting stroboscopic nightmare. In the flickering white light, she saw him. He wasn't a standard insurgent. He was gaunt, his face wrapped in a dirty keffiyeh, leaving only his eyes visible. Eyes that were bloodshot and wide with a strange, manic intensity. He wore rags mixed with pieces of old Soviet webbing, and on his chest, taped to his vest, was a dosimeter. The needle was pegged in the red. He held a long, curved blade in a reverse grip. He shielded his eyes from the strobe, backing away. "American?" the man rasped. His voice was like grinding stones. "You... American?" Maya leveled her pistol at his center mass. "Drop the knife! Drop it!" Miller was groaning on the floor behind her. "Lynn, frag him! Kill him!" The man didn't drop the knife. He looked at Maya, then at Miller. He didn't look afraid of the gun. He looked resigned. "You brought the shovel," the man said, his English broken but understandable. "To bury us." "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya shouted, her heart hammering against her ribs. "We're trapped." The entrance collapsed. The man laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound that turned into a cough. He spat blood onto the floor. "Not collapsed," he said. "Sealed. They sealed the tomb." He sheathed his knife. It was a move of supreme arrogance or total despair. He turned his back on Maya's gun. "Follow," he said, "if you want to see the fire." "Lynn, shoot him," Miller ordered, trying to crawl forward. "That is an enemy combatant." Maya looked at the man walking away into the dark. He moved with a limp matching Miller's injury. He touched the wall as he walked, as if checking the pulse of the tunnel. "He knows the way," Maya said. "And he's not attacking." "He just tried to slit your throat." "He hit my chest plate," Maya corrected. "He knew where the armor was. He was testing me." She lowered her weapon. The matriarch instinct flinched, but the EOD tech took over. Curiosity. The need to solve the puzzle. Why was this man wearing a dosimeter? Why did he think they were there to bury him? "Get up, Captain," Maya said, offering Miller a hand. "We're following him." "This is a mistake," Miller hissed, but he took her hand. They moved deeper. The air grew hotter, heavy with the metallic taste of radiation and the ozone smell of high-voltage electronics. The man in rags led them through a heavy blast door that had been forced open years ago, and then they saw it. The diamond-tipped drill of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers bit into the limestone bedrock. The sound was a low, resonant vibration that rattled the teeth in Maya's skull. Dust trickled down from the cracked concrete archways of the central chamber, coating the black sphere of the Cobalt-60 device in a fresh layer of gray. "They're punching through," Captain Miller yelled over the noise, his voice edged with the manic energy of pain and morphine. He swung his rifle toward Kasim. "He's stalling us. He's waiting for his backup." Kasim stood by the console, his hands raised but his eyes hard. He didn't look at the gun. He looked at the wires Maya was inspecting. "No backup," Kasim said, his voice calm. "Only concrete. They pour it. They seal us. Like pharaohs." "Shut up!" Miller limped forward, the splint on his leg scraping the floor. "Sergeant Lin, step away from the device. That is a direct order. We are neutralizing the hostile and securing the package." Maya didn't move. She was staring at the modification Kasim had made to the Soviet-era control board. It was a nest of copper wire, scavenged circuit boards, and duct tape. But it wasn't random. It was a bypass loop. "Sir, if you shoot him, you might destabilize the magnetic lock on the cooling rods," Maya said, her eyes tracing the yellow wire running from the main breaker to Kasim. "He's an insurgent, Lin! He rigged this whole place!" Miller lunged. It was a clumsy, drug-fueled motion, but he was a large man. He grabbed Kasim by the throat and slammed him against the control bank. "No!" Maya screamed. Kasim didn't fight back. He didn't try to disarm Miller. He simply reached into his rags and ripped open the front of his shirt. Miller pressed the muzzle of his M4 against Kasim's forehead. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Do it," Kasim rasped. "Send me to God." "Captain, wait!" Maya threw herself at them, grabbing Miller's wrist and forcing the barrel upward just as he squeezed. Crack! The shot went wide, smashing a halogen work light hanging from the ceiling. Glass rained down. "Look at his chest!" Maya shouted, shoving Miller back. "Look!" Miller panted, his eyes wild. He looked. Taped to Kasim's emaciated chest, right over his heart, was a sensor pad. A thick, shielded cable ran from the sensor, snaking down his leg and plugging directly into the auxiliary port of the nuclear device. On the console, a small green light pulsed in time with Kasim's breathing. Blink. 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 "What is that?" Miller whispered, the gun shaking in his hand. "It's a biometric relay," Maya said, her voice trembling. She stepped in to inspect the connection. "Pulse monitor, probably scavenged from an old hospital unit." She traced the signal path on the circuit board. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The relay wasn't just monitoring him. It was holding a gate open. "It's a dead man's switch," Maya said, looking up at Miller. "It's wired into the solenoid that controls the emergency coolant flush. As long as his heart beats, the circuit stays closed. The coolant flows." She looked at Kasim. The man was smiling, a grim, toothless expression. "If my heart stops," Kasim said softly, "the magnet disengages. The rods drop. The thermal runaway becomes instantaneous." Miller lowered the rifle. His face went pale, the sweat tracking through the dust on his skin. "You're lying," Miller spat. "It's a bluff. You can't wire a Soviet nuke to a heart rate monitor." "He's an engineer, sir," Maya said, looking at Kasim with a newfound, terrifying respect. "He didn't just maintain this place. He integrated himself into it. He is the safety." The room fell silent, save for the distant grinding of the drill and the hum of the machine. Miller looked at the bomb, then at Kasim, then at the roof. The chain of command had just been short-circuited by biology. He couldn't kill the enemy. He couldn't secure the objective. "Why?" Miller asked Kasim. "Why rig it to yourself?" "Because I knew you would come," Kasim said. "The Americans always come back to bury their sins. I knew you would try to silence me. Now, if you silence me, you silence the whole valley." Maya stood up. She holstered her pistol. The dynamic in the room had shifted violently. Kasim was no longer a prisoner. He was the hostage, and the hostage-taker wrapped in one. "We have a problem, Captain," Maya said, her voice steadying as she engaged her EOD mindset. "The drilling vibration. If they break through the ceiling, the shock could induce tachycardia or a vagal response in him. If his heart rate spikes too high or drops too low, it blows," Miller finished. "Yes. So we have to keep him alive," Miller said, the bitterness coating his words like acid. "And we have to keep him calm. And we have to stop that drill," Maya added. She looked at the ceiling. The vibration was getting stronger. Dust was falling in sheets now. "Command doesn't know," Maya said. "They think they're just sealing a hole. They don't know they're about to drop a slab of concrete on a hair-trigger nuke." She looked at the radio on Miller's vest. Still static, still jammed. "We need to send a signal," Maya said. "Not a radio signal. They're blocking those. We need a physical signal." She looked at the ventilation ducts running along the ceiling. The same ducts Kasim had used to keep the air breathable for 30 years. "Kasim," Maya asked, "where do the vents come out?" "Near the village well," Kasim said. "But they are small, too small for a person." "I don't need to send a person," Maya said. She reached into her EOD kit and pulled out a block of C4 plastic explosive and a colored smoke grenade. "I just need to send a message that they can't ignore." She turned to Miller. "Sir, I need you to watch him. Do not shoot him. Do not scare him. Check his pulse every minute. If he flatlines, we all vaporize." Miller glared at her, hating the reversal of power, hating that he had to play nursemaid to the enemy. But he nodded. "Go," he growled. Maya grabbed her kit and ran toward the maintenance ladder. She had to climb. She had to blow the vent. And she had to pray that the drill didn't hit the chamber before she got there. The timer on the wall counted up. 04, 15:22. The bomb hummed, waiting for the heart to stop. Chapter 7. The Uneasy Truce. Maya slid down the ladder, her boots hitting the concrete floor with a heavy thud. She wiped a layer of sweat and grit from her forehead. The air in the chamber was already stifling, but up near the ceiling vents, it had been an oven. "Charge is set," she reported, her voice flat. "But we can't blow it yet." Captain Miller was slumped against a pillar, his M4 rifle resting across his lap, barrel pointed vaguely at Kasim. The morphine had glazed his eyes, but the paranoia was burning through the fog. "Why not?" Miller slurred. "Blow the vent. Signal the extraction." "Because the vibration from the drill is already tripping the anti-tamper sensors," Maya said, walking past him to the console. She knelt beside Kasim. "If I detonate a block of C4 in the shaft right now, the shockwave will trigger the collapse sequence. We need to bypass the vibration sensor first." Kasim didn't look up. His hands, thin and trembling, were manipulating a pair of wire strippers he had taken from Maya's kit. He was working on the exposed circuitry of the bomb's cooling unit. "The Americans used a mercury tilt switch," Kasim murmured, speaking to the machine rather than to Maya. "Very sensitive, designed to stop anyone from moving the sphere. The drill, it makes the mercury dance." Maya looked at the diagram. He was right. The vibrations from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers drilling team 50 feet above were shaking the ground just enough to agitate the liquid mercury. If the circuit closed, the bomb would think it was being stolen and detonate. "We need to freeze the switch," Maya said, her mind racing through the EOD protocols. "Or short the lead so the signal stays open." Short the lead, Kasim agreed. But the wire is shielded. If we cut the wrong layer, it grounds out. Boom! I can do it, Maya said. I have a precision cutter. Stop! Miller barked. He tried to stand, but his broken leg buckled, sending him crashing back down. He grimaced, leveling his rifle. Sergeant Lin, step away from him. You are collaborating with a hostile. That is treason. Maya stood up slowly. She turned to face her commanding officer. The silent professional archetype that had defined her career, the quiet, obedient technician, finally shattered. Captain, she said, her voice dropping an octave, cold and hard as steel. Look at the monitor. Look at his heart rate. Miller squinted at the green display. 110 BPM. He's scared, Miller spat. He's keeping us alive, Maya countered. And right now, he is the only other person in this hole who understands the physics of a cobalt sphere. You are injured, you are compromised, and you are useless to me. The insult hung in the air, heavy and toxic. In a normal world, that was a court-martial offense. In the tomb, it was just a fact. I am giving you a direct order, Miller whispered, his finger shaking on the trigger guard. Kill him. Neutralize the threat. We secure the device ourselves. If I kill him, Maya said, taking a step toward the gun. The dead man switch drops the rods. We die. If I don't kill him, and we don't fix this sensor, the drill hits the ceiling, the mercury moves, and we die. So, sir, you can shoot me, or you can let me work. But those are your only two options. Miller stared at her. He looked at the Asian American woman he had mocked as a canary just an hour ago. He didn't see a subordinate anymore. He saw someone who had accepted death and was just trying to negotiate the terms. Slowly, Miller lowered the rifle. He didn't apologize. He didn't agree. He just lacked the strength to pull the trigger. Log it, Miller muttered, closing his eyes. I'm logging this. Mutiny. You do that, sir, Maya said. She turned back to Kasim. The old man was watching her with a strange expression. Not fear, respect. The blue wire, Maya said, kneeling beside him. The shielding is thickest there. We go in from the side. Yes, Qasim said. He handed her the tool. Steady hands, little bird. The mountain is shaking. As they worked, shoulder to shoulder, the grinding noise from above grew louder. Dust rained down on their hands. Maya could smell the unwashed scent of Qasim and the copper tang of the bomb. For a moment, the lines of nationality and ideology dissolved. There were no Americans or insurgents here, just two mechanics trying to keep a son from being born in a closet. It started with a sound like a dying animal. A high-pitched metallic shriek echoed through the chamber, cutting through the low rumble of the drill above. Then came a clunk, followed by the hiss of steam. The pump, Qasim whispered. Maya looked at the console. The temperature gauge, which had been hovering in the yellow, suddenly spiked into the red. Core temp, 200 degrees, 250 degrees. The primary coolant loop just seized, Maya said, wiping sweat from her eyes. The sweat wasn't evaporating anymore. The air was too saturated. The bearing failed. The heat hit them instantly. It wasn't a gradual warming. It was a radiant, physical wave that rolled off the black sphere. The cobalt-60 core, no longer bathed in the circulating liquid nitrogen and water mixture, began to assert its thermodynamic will. Masks off, Maya ordered, gasping. We'll suffocate in them. She ripped off her helmet and balaclava. The air burned her throat. It tasted of ozone and hot metal. It's getting hot, Miller mumbled from the corner. He had stripped off his body armor. His skin was flushed a bright, unhealthy red. Is it summer? Heat stroke, Maya diagnosed, glancing at him. He's delirious. She wasn't far behind. The heavy EOD suit trousers felt like lead weights. She wanted to strip them off, but she knew the radiation shielding in the Kevlar was the only thing keeping her DNA from unraveling. We have to. Manual flush, Kasim rasped. He dragged himself toward a large red wheel valve on the far wall. Emergency reservoir. Maya moved to help him. Her vision was swimming. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to detach themselves and move. Tricks of the light, she told herself. Just the heat. But as she grabbed the wheel next to Kasim, she saw them. Figures, standing in the shadows. They weren't wearing the rags of insurgents. They were wearing woodland-pattern BDU camouflage, the uniform of the U.S. Army, circa 1991. "Do you see them?" Miller called out, laughing weakly. "Bravo, company. They're here to relieve us." Maya blinked, shaking her head violently to clear the hallucination. The figures didn't vanish. They were just corpses. Desiccated, mummified corpses stacked against the wall, preserved by the dry tunnel air until the humidity of the leak hit them. "Pull," Kasim grunted. Together they heaved on the valve. It was rusted shut. The heat was becoming unbearable. Maya's skin felt like it was blistering. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Thump, thump, thump. Sinking with the drill, sinking with Kasim's monitor. "Come on," she screamed, channeling her fear into torque. Crack. The valve turned. A rush of tepid, rusty water flowed into the system. The screaming whine of the reactor dropped in pitch, settling into a low, angry gurgle. The temperature gauge halted at 300 degrees C. Not safe, but not critical. Maya collapsed onto the floor, her chest heaving. She looked at the corpses in the corner. Now that the adrenaline had faded, she could see them clearly. There were 4 of them. They were huddled around a radio. One of them held a pistol in his skeletal hand. "They didn't die from the bomb," Maya whispered, crawling toward them. She reached the first skeleton. The skull had a single clean hole in the temple. "Suicide," she breathed. She looked at the others. Same wound. Execution style. Or a pact. She looked at the radio they were huddled around. It was an old Sincar's unit. There was a logbook lying open next to it, the pages yellowed and brittle. Maya reached out, her hand trembling, and picked up the book. The handwriting was jagged, desperate. "Day 14. Command says wait. Air is running out. The coolant is leaking. Johnson is coughing blood. They aren't coming back for us. They told us to hold the line. They lied." Maya looked up at the ceiling, at the source of the drilling noise. "Command knew," she said, her voice cracking. "They knew about this team. They left them down here to die." Kasim was watching her from the valve. He looked sad, ancient. "They sealed the door in 1991, Kasim said softly. "I watched from the vents. Your soldiers. They waited for weeks. Then they realized the truth. You are not the first canary, little bird." Miller was laughing again, a low, sobbing sound. "Extraction is coming. Extraction is coming." Maya gripped the logbook. The heat was still oppressive, but a cold rage was spreading through her veins, chilling her to the bone. "They aren't digging to save us," Maya said, standing up. She looked at the drill bit, which was now visibly vibrating the ceiling rock. "They're digging to pour concrete. They're making sure we stay here just like them." She looked at the bomb. Then she looked at the blue wire Kasim had shown her. "Kasim," she said, "if we cut the blue wire, does it disarm the bomb?" "No," Kasim said. "It triggers the signal. It tells the satellite we are here." "Good," Maya said. She drew her knife. "If they want to bury us, Let's make sure the whole world hears the funeral. The sound of the drill changed pitch. It went from a low, grinding rumble to a high-frequency scream of metal tearing through rebar. Maya looked up, shielding her eyes against the falling grit. The ceiling of the central chamber, already compromised by decades of neglect and the thermal stress of the reactor, began to bow inward. "They're through!" Captain Miller shouted. He dragged himself upright using the console for support, ignoring the agony in his splinted leg. Tears streamed down his dust-caked face, cutting clean tracks through the grime. "I told you, Lynn! I told you! Command didn't leave us! They're punching a rescue shaft!" Kasim didn't move. He sat by the valve, his hand resting on the blue wire access panel, his eyes closed. He looked like a man praying, or perhaps a man waiting for the executioner. "Get ready to signal," Miller ordered, fumbling for his glow stick. "As soon as that bit clears, we wave them down." Maya didn't grab a glow stick. She grabbed her EOD multi-tool and a roll of heavy-gauge copper wire she had scavenged. She watched the ceiling with the cold, analytical gaze of a technician assessing a blast radius. Crunch. A massive chunk of concrete, the size of an engine block, broke loose from the ceiling and crashed to the floor, narrowly missing the Cobalt-60 sphere. A shaft of light pierced the gloom. Not sunlight, but the harsh, artificial glare of a spotlight mounted on the drill head. The drill bit itself descended into the room. It was a massive, diamond-toothed auger, spinning slowly now. "Over here!" Miller screamed, waving his arms. "Bravo, Element! We are secure! Requesting immediate evac!" Maya stepped back. She saw something Miller didn't. Attached to the side of the drill shaft was a thick, black rubber hose. It wasn't an airline. It wasn't a communication cable. It was a tremie pipe, industrial tubing used for pouring concrete into deep foundations. "Captain, get back!" Maya yelled. Before Miller could process the warning, the hose pulsed. A thick, gray sludge erupted from the nozzle with the force of a fire hose. Splat. The wet concrete slammed into the floor, splattering Miller's boots. It wasn't just cement. It was a quick-setting, high-density aggregate designed for sealing radioactive containment breaches. "What?" Miller stammered, staring at the gray sludge pooling around his feet. "What are they doing?" "They aren't sending a basket, sir," Maya said, her voice trembling with rage. "They're pouring the cap. They're turning this room into a sarcophagus." The flow of concrete increased. It began to fill the lower depression of the room, rising steadily toward the cooling pumps. "Stop!" Miller screamed at the drill, at the light, at the god above. "We're still down here. Blue on blue. Cease fire." The drill didn't stop. The operators on the surface couldn't hear him. They were following a standard containment protocol. Drill, verify cavity, pour. They likely assumed the initial explosion had killed everyone or worse. They didn't care. "Kasim." Maya turned to the old man. "The heat. What happens when the concrete hits the sphere?" Kasim opened his eyes. "The concrete is wet. The sphere is 300 degrees. Steam explosion. Then, the thermal shock cracks the casing. The cobalt releases." They didn't have hours anymore. They had minutes before the wet concrete hit the superheated bomb core and triggered a dirty steam explosion that would kill them instantly, followed by a radiological release that would poison the groundwater as the concrete failed to set properly around the breach. "We have to stop the pour," Maya said. "We cannot stop the mountain," Kasim said softly. "No," Maya said, looking at the spinning steel shaft of the drill. "But we can make the mountain listen." She looked at the wiring diagram in her hand. The blue wire. It was the telemetry output. It sent data. But with the jammer active, the radio signal was useless. But the drill was a continuous steel rod connecting them directly to the surface equipment. Steel conducts electricity. Kasim, Maya said, pointing to the drill shaft. If we ground the telemetry output to that drill shaft, we can send a voltage spike right up into their equipment. We can trip their breakers. Kasim looked at the drill, then at the wire. A spark of life returned to his eyes. We turn the drill into an antenna, he whispered. Yes, but you must get close. The concrete. I'll handle the concrete, Maya said. Give me the lead. She stripped the insulation off the heavy copper wire. She had to climb the gantry, jump onto the spinning drill shaft, and secure the wire while dodging a fire hose of wet cement. Miller, she barked. I need cover. Miller was staring at the wall, catatonic. Captain. Maya grabbed him by his vest and shook him. If you want to live, I need you to shoot that hose, puncture it, divert the flow so I can get to the shaft. Do you understand? Miller blinked. The soldier in him responded to the direct task. Shoot the hose, he repeated. Yes, cyclic rate. Now. Maya sprinted toward the gantry. Above her, the concrete rain intensified. The tomb was closing. The opening to the vent was a square of blackness, barely 18 inches wide. Maya stood before it, stripping off the last of her tactical gear. The plate carrier dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. Her helmet followed. She kept only her pistol, secured in a low-profile waistband holster, her knife, and a single chem light cracked and glowing a dull green. You are too wide at the shoulders, Qasim said, eyeing her frame. You must dislocate. Relax the muscle. Slide like oil. I know how to crawl, Qasim, Maya snapped, though her hands were shaking. It wasn't the enemy she feared. It was the squeeze, the crushing weight of the earth pressing in on a metal tube that hadn't been inspected since the Berlin Wall fell. She turned to Miller. The captain was sitting against the console, his face pale, his eyes tracking the red numbers on the display. Sauerkraut 45 Duxon. Captain, she said. If the jamming stops, radio for a full abort. Code, broken arrow. Tell them there's a loose nuke. Miller nodded slowly. He didn't look at her. He looked at his own hands, stained with the grease of the weapon he was too injured to fire effectively. If you don't come back, Lynn, I'll make sure the switch stays closed. I won't shoot him. It was the closest thing to an apology she would ever get. Maya turned and pushed herself into the hole. The smell hit her first. It wasn't the metallic tang of the bomb room. It was the organic, rotting scent of 30 years of dead things. The metal was cold against her stomach. She crawled forward, dragging her body by her elbows. Scrape, pull, scrape, pull. The darkness was absolute beyond the faint green glow of the chem light held in her teeth. The shaft angled sharply upward. Gravity began to fight her. Her muscles, already burning from the fight and the heat, screamed in protest. 10 meters in. The air grew thin. Clang. Her boot kicked a loose rivet. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. Dust rained down from the top of the duct, coating her sweating face, clogging her nose. She couldn't sneeze. There wasn't room to expand her chest enough to sneeze. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. I'm stuck. I'm going to die in this tube. She stopped moving. Her breathing became ragged, shallow gasps. The walls seemed to be shrinking. The weight of the mountain above her felt physical, crushing her spine. Breathe, she whispered to herself, spitting the chem light onto the metal floor ahead of her. Engineering problem. It's just a pipe. You are a fluid. Flow. She forced her mind to detach from her body. She wasn't a person. She was a piston. Extend, contract. She crawled over something soft. Fur, bones, rats. She didn't flinch. She pushed past the nest, ignoring the squeals of the disturbed rodents. Then, the shaft narrowed. A weld seam had buckled inward, reducing the clearance by 2 inches. Maya pushed. Her shoulders caught. She was wedged. She kicked her feet, seeking traction, but... "The timer," he said. Maya looked. The red LED display had frozen. Yo 4:28:15. "It stopped?" Maya asked. "No," Qasim said, tapping the glass. "It reset, the surge, it tricked the system. It thinks it received a maintenance signal." He looked at Maya, his eyes gleaming. "You bought us time, maybe an hour. But now, they know we are here, and they know we are fighting back." Miller slumped against the wall, laughing hysterically. "They know. They know. Hatcher will come down. He'll bring the team." Maya shook her head. She knew better. She had just electrocuted their equipment. She had just proven that the site was not dormant. "They won't send Hatcher," Maya said, checking the magazine in her pistol. She had 3 rounds left. "They'll send a cleanup crew, special activities, or they'll just drop a bunker buster." She looked at the hole in the ceiling where the drill was stuck. It was a cork in a bottle. "We have one way out," Maya said. "And it's not that hole." She turned to Qasim. "You said there were vents near the village well. Small ones." "Too small for a man," Qasim repeated. Maya looked at her own slight frame. She looked at the massive, broken body of Captain Miller. She looked at the frail skeleton of Qasim. "Too small for a man," she agreed. "But maybe not for me." She realized what she had to do. She had to leave them. She had to crawl through a ventilation duct filled with 30 years of rats and rust, surface in the middle of a hostile village, and somehow stop the airstrike that was inevitably coming. "I'm going," Maya said. "You can't leave me," Miller shouted, panic returning instantly. "I'm not leaving you, sir," Maya said, her voice cold. "I'm flanking." The opening to the vent was a square of blackness, barely 18 inches wide. Maya stood before it, stripping off the last of her tactical gear. The plate carrier dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. Her helmet followed. She kept only her pistol, secured in a low-profile waistband holster, her knife, and a single chem light cracked and glowing a dull green. "You are too wide at the shoulders," Qasim said, eyeing her frame. "You must dislocate. Relax the muscle. Slide like oil." "I know how to crawl, Qasim," Maya snapped, though her hands were shaking. It wasn't the enemy she feared. It was the squeeze, the crushing weight of the earth pressing in on a metal tube that hadn't been inspected since the Berlin Wall fell. She turned to Miller. The captain was sitting against the console, his face pale, his eyes tracking the red numbers on the display. "Sauerkraut 45 Duxon." "Captain," she said, "if the jamming stops, radio for a full abort. Code, broken arrow. Tell them there's a loose nuke." Miller nodded slowly. He didn't look at her. He looked at his own hands, stained with the grease of the weapon he was too injured to fire effectively. "If you don't come back, Lynn, I'll make sure the switch stays closed. I won't shoot him." It was the closest thing to an apology she would ever get. Maya turned and pushed herself into the hole. The smell hit her first. It wasn't the metallic tang of the bomb room. It was the organic, rotting scent of 30 years of dead things. The metal was cold against her stomach. She crawled forward, dragging her body by her elbows. Scrape, pull, scrape, pull. The darkness was absolute beyond the faint green glow of the chem light held in her teeth. The shaft angled sharply upward. Gravity began to fight her. Her muscles, already burning from the fight and the heat, screamed in protest. 10 meters in. The air grew thin. Clang. Her boot kicked a loose rivet. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. Dust rained down from the top of the duct, coating her sweating face, clogging her nose. She couldn't sneeze. There wasn't room to expand her chest enough to sneeze. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in her chest. I'm stuck. I'm going to die in this tube. She stopped moving. Her breathing became ragged, shallow gasps. The walls seemed to be shrinking. The weight of the mountain above her felt physical, crushing her spine. Breathe, she whispered to herself, spitting the chem light onto the metal floor ahead of her. Engineering problem. It's just a pipe. You are a fluid. Flow. She forced her mind to detach from her body. She wasn't a person. She was a piston. Extend, contract. She crawled over something soft. Fur, bones, rats. She didn't flinch. She pushed past the nest, ignoring the squeals of the disturbed rodents. Then, the shaft narrowed. A weld seam had buckled inward, reducing the clearance by 2 inches. Maya pushed. Her shoulders caught. She was wedged. She kicked her feet, seeking traction, but her boots just scraped uselessly against the smooth metal. She was trapped. This is it. The inglorious end. She closed her eyes. In the silence of the bind, she heard a sound from far below. A rhythmic, faint tapping. Tap, 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 Kasim. He was tapping on the ductwork in the chamber below. A signal, a heartbeat. He was telling her he was still alive. He was telling her to keep moving. Maya gritted her teeth. She exhaled, forcing every cubic centimeter of air out of her lungs, collapsing her ribcage until her chest screamed for oxygen. She made herself smaller. With a final desperate lunge, she shoved forward. The metal scraped skin from her shoulders, tearing her uniform, but she popped through the constriction like a cork. She gasped, sucking in the stale air. Ahead, the green light illuminated a grid pattern. The exit. She crawled the last few meters, her body numb. She reached up and pushed against the grate. It didn't move. Rusted shut. Come on, she hissed. She drew her pistol. She couldn't shoot the lock. The ricochet would kill her. She reversed the weapon, using the heavy steel butt of the magazine well as a hammer. Clang, clang. The rust gave way. The grate swung upward with a screech of tortured metal. Maya pulled herself up, scrambling out of the hole and rolling onto dry, rocky ground. She wasn't in a village. She was in a graveyard. The sun was setting, casting long, blood-red shadows across the desert floor. Maya lay flat on the ground, chest heaving, the cool evening air burning her lungs after the stifling heat of the tunnel. She scanned her surroundings. She was in a small, walled cemetery on the edge of the village. The headstones were simple, weathered rocks. Movement, she whispered to herself, old habits dying hard. She checked her pistol. It was covered in dust, but the action was clear. She crawled to the edge of the low stone wall and peered over. The village was quiet. Too quiet. There were no lights, no people in the streets, but there were tracks in the sand. Fresh ones. She reached for her radio. She toggled the frequency. Command, this is Echo 2. Blind transmission. Broken arrow. I repeat, broken arrow. We have a loose nuclear asset. Abort the strike. Over. Static. The jamming was still active. The Thor system was blocking her low-power handheld radio. Then she heard it. A sound that froze her blood. Rumble. Low, distant, but unmistakable. The sound of high-altitude heavy bombers. B-1 Lancers or B-52s. They were already on their run. They weren't coming to drop precision munitions. They were coming to level the grid square. Maya stood up. She had to get to higher ground. She had to use the only thing she had left, a signal flare. She sprinted toward the village center, keeping low. As she rounded the corner of a mud brick house, she stopped dead. She wasn't alone. Standing in the square, surrounding the ancient stone well that marked the ventilation shaft's origin, were a dozen figures. They weren't the masked insurgents Hatcher had briefed them on. They weren't foreign fighters. They were women. Old women, mostly. Dressed in black abayas, their faces weathered like the landscape. And they were armed. They held ancient bolt-action rifles, rusty AK-47s, and even farm tools. They stood in a circle around the well, facing outward, guarding it. Maya raised her hands slowly, her pistol hanging from one finger by the trigger guard to show she wasn't a threat. "Stop!" she shouted in Arabic, her voice cracking. I am not here to fight." The women turned, a dozen barrels leveled at her chest. One woman, the oldest of them, stepped forward. She held a British Lee Enfield rifle that looked like it had seen the Second World War. She looked at Maya's torn uniform, the gray sludge of the concrete covering her boots, the burns on her hands. She didn't look angry. She looked recognized. "You came from the earth," the woman said, her voice dry as the sand. "From the tomb." "Yes," Maya gasped. "Kasim. Do you know Kasim?" The woman lowered her rifle slightly. "Kasim is my brother. He has watched the fire below for 30 years. The realization hit Maya. These weren't insurgents holding a village. They were the custodians, the guardians. Kasim wasn't a lone fanatic. He was part of a community that had silently dedicated itself to keeping the American poison from leaking out. They had been guarding the ventilation shaft, keeping people away, keeping the secret that the U.S. military had tried to bury. "The planes are coming," Maya said, pointing to the sky. The rumble was louder now. "My people. They think this is a terrorist camp. They are coming to destroy it. If they drop the bombs, the sphere cracks. The poison comes out. Everyone dies," the women murmured. They understood the threat. They had lived on top of a nuke for a generation. "What do we do?" the old woman asked. Maya looked at the well. Then she looked at the women. "We need to make them look," Maya said. "We need to make them see that you aren't soldiers." She grabbed the signal flare from her pouch. It was a Mk-13 Mod 0, designed for pilot rescue. Day end, orange smoke. Night end, red flare. "Gather everyone," Maya ordered. "In the open, take off the veils, look up." "They will shoot us," a younger woman protested. "No," Maya said, praying she was right about the rules of engagement for the bombers. "They are looking for heat signatures of weapons. They are looking for military formations. We need to look like a funeral." It was a desperate gamble. PID. If the sensor operators saw a group of armed men, they dropped. If they saw women and children in the open, not running, not hiding, they might check fire. "Do it!" the matriarch commanded. The women moved. They threw down their weapons. They gathered in the center of the square, huddled together. Maya pulled the cap off the flare. She ignited the red end. A brilliant crimson light erupted, hissing and spitting sparks. Maya waved it overhead, tracing a large X in the darkening sky. The rumble was directly overhead now. The sound was deafening. Deuce Lawson, pilot of the lead B-1B Lancer, watched the targeting display. The grid coordinates were locked. The payload was a mixed stick of GBU-31J dams, bunker busters, designed to punch through 40 feet of rock and concrete. 2 minutes to release, the Weapons Systems Officer WSO reported. Target is designated as hostile compound. Confirmed activity. Copy, Lawson said. Master arm on. The display showed the village in grainy thermal monochrome. He could see heat signatures, bright spots, people. Ground controller reports active jamming in the area, the WSO said. No friendly comms. We are cleared hot. Lawson's thumb hovered over the pickle button. It was a standard mission. Sanitize the site. Bury the evidence. He didn't know about the Cobalt 60. He just knew it was a high-value insurgent cache. Then, the display flared. What the hell is that? Lawson asked. A bright, blooming star of heat erupted in the center of the target zone. It wasn't the flash of gunfire. It was steady, intense. Thermal bloom, the WSO said. Someone popped a flare. Zoom in, Lawson ordered. The sniper pod optics slewed and tightened. On the screen, the grainy figures resolved. They weren't running for cover. They weren't manning anti-aircraft guns. They were standing in a circle, looking up, and in the center, a single figure was waving the flare. The heat signature of the figure was distinctive. Small frame. And, Is that a friendly strobe? The WSO asked. Maya had activated the IR strobe on her belt, the one she had almost left behind in the tunnel. It pulsed with a specific military frequency. Flash, flash, pause, flash. That's a US code, Lawson said, his heart skipping a beat. That's a friendly. Intel said the area was clear of friendlies, the WSO argued. They said the ground team was MIA. Look at the formation, Lawson said. That's not a tactical formation. That's civilians and one friendly. He looked at the release timer. 30 seconds. If he dropped, he wiped them out. If he didn't drop, and it was a trick, he failed the mission. But the pattern, the flare, the strobe, it was a desperate scream in the language of light. Abort, Lawson said. Abort pass. Safing weapons. Sir, command ordered, I said abort! Lawson banked the massive aircraft hard to the left. The G-forces pressed him into the seat. Get on the horn. Tell command we have positive ID of non-combatants and a friendly signal at the target. We are not dropping on a friendly. The bomber screamed over the village, low and fast, the sound wave shattering windows. But no bombs fell. On the ground, Maya watched the dark shape of the aircraft blot out the stars for a second, then bank away. The sound of the engines shifted from an approaching roar to a receding whine. She fell to her knees. The flare sputtered and died in her hand. The women of the village didn't cheer. They just stared at the sky. Then at Maya. The matriarch walked over to her. She reached down and pulled Maya to her feet. They did not drop, the woman said. No, Maya whispered. Not today. She looked at the radio in her hand. The jamming had stopped. With the bomber overhead, the localized jammer on the drilling rig had likely been deactivated to prevent interference with the aircraft's comms. Maya keyed the mic. Command, this is Echo 2. Authenticators Alpha Sierra 9. We are alive. The facility is secured. And if you send another plane, I will personally blow the vent, and radioactive dust will cover this entire country. Do you copy? There was a long silence. Then, a new voice came on the line. Not Hatcher. Someone higher up. A colonel, perhaps. Echo 2, this is actual. Stand down. We are sending a bird. Do not, I repeat, do not release the asset. Maya looked at the old woman. She looked at the well that led down to Miller and Kasim. Copy, Maya said. We're waiting. She clipped the radio back to her belt. The adrenaline was gone. leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion and a cold, hard clarity. She had won the battle, but the war to keep the truth from being buried, had just begun. The sound of the B-1 bomber fading was replaced by a more aggressive, rhythmic thumping. Whump, 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 low altitude, heavy rotors. "Get back," Maya ordered the matriarch. "Get everyone back into the houses, now." The women scattered, melting into the shadows of the mud-brick structures. Maya stood alone by the ancient well, the pistol in her hand feeling absurdly small against what was coming. A black shape crested the dune line. It wasn't a standard army medevac. It was an MH-60 Pave Hawk, painted matte black, no unit markings. It didn't have the Red Cross. It bristled with miniguns on the door mounts. Special Activities Division, Maya thought, or a CIA paramilitary team. The helicopter flared, kicking up a blinding sandstorm. It didn't land. It hovered 3 feet off the hard-packed earth. The side doors slid open. 6 operators fast-roped down. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that Maya recognized instantly. Tier 1 operators. They didn't point their weapons at the perimeter. They pointed them at her. "Drop the weapon!" the lead operator shouted, his voice amplified by a speaker. He wore quad-nod night vision goggles flipped up on his helmet, his face covered by a skull-patterned balaclava. "On your knees, hands interlaced." Maya didn't drop the gun. She didn't raise it either. She kept it at the low ready, but she used her free hand to hold up her radio. "I am Sergeant Maya Lin, 52nd Ordnance Group," she shouted over the rotor wash. "I have control of the site." The lead operator advanced, his rifle, a suppressed HK-416, trained on her chest. "Secure her," he ordered his team. "Prep the well for a thermobaric drop. We seal it and RTB." Maya's blood ran cold. Thermobaric, a fuel-air explosive. If they dropped that down the well, it would suck the oxygen out of the tunnel system and incinerate everything inside. Miller, Kasim, the evidence. "Negative," Maya screamed. She backed up until her heels touched the stone rim of the well. "If you drop a charge, you trigger the dead man's switch." The team leader hesitated. He held up a fist. The operators behind him froze. "What did you say?" the leader demanded, stepping closer. "The device is a Cobalt-60 sphere rigged to a biometric monitor on a hostel down below," Maya lied, mixing truth with fabrication to buy seconds. "I rigged a secondary trigger to the well entrance. You blow the well, the vibration trips the mercury switch. The core goes critical. You won't just kill the witnesses, you'll kill yourselves. This chopper won't clear the blast radius of a dirty bomb." It was a bluff. The mercury switch was bypassed, but they didn't know that. The team leader tapped his comms, likely checking with an officer circling in a C-130 miles above. He stared at Maya. She stared back. She wasn't a subordinate anymore. She was the person with the detonator. "You're bluffing, Sergeant," the leader said. "Do you have a Geiger counter?" Maya asked, her voice steady. "Check your dosimeter. The radiation is already leaking up the shaft. Do you want to be the one who explains to the president why eastern Syria is uninhabitable for 10,000 years? The operator glanced at his wrist. He looked back at the hovering helicopter. "Stand down," the voice in his earpiece must have said. The leader lowered his rifle an inch. "We are here to extract American personnel. That means you, and the captain. The hostel stays." "The hostel comes," Maya said. "He's the only one who knows how to keep the cooling system stable while we move. If he stays, the bomb stays active. If he dies, it blows. We don't negotiate with—" "He's not a hostage," Maya snapped. "He's the safety pin. You want to pull the pin? Go ahead. But I'm staying right here. The standoff stretched. The sand whipped around them. Finally, the leader signaled the chopper. Bring the winch, he ordered. We pull them up, 2 minutes. Then we burn the site. We don't burn the site, Maya corrected him. We cap it. We pour concrete. But we get the people out first. The team leader glared at her, realizing he had lost control of the tactical situation to an EOD tech covered in mud. But he nodded. Minutes later, the winch motor whined. Captain Miller was hauled up first, strapped into a jungle penetrator basket. He was unconscious, his leg dangling. Then came Kasim. The old man looked small and frail as he was lifted into the blinding light of the surface. He looked at Maya, then at the village, then at the black helicopter. He didn't speak. He knew his war was over. Maya was the last to hook in. As she rose from the ground, she looked back at the village. The women had emerged from the shadows. They stood in a silent line, watching the Americans leave. The matriarch raised a hand. Maya didn't wave back. She felt sick. She knew what would happen next. The team wouldn't burn the village today. But the secret was out. The village was now a liability. As the helicopter banked away, leaving the well alone in the desert, Maya looked at the operator opposite her. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Qasim with the cold, detached eyes of a butcher waiting for orders. The room was white. White walls, white table, white noise. It was cleaner than anywhere Maya had been in 6 months, but it felt dirtier than the tunnel. Across the table sat a colonel she didn't know and a civilian in a suit who hadn't introduced himself. "Let's review the statement again, Sergeant Lin," the civilian said. He slid a piece of paper across the metal table. "You entered the facility. You encountered a structural collapse caused by insurgent IEDs. Captain Miller was injured. You performed a tactical withdrawal. There was no biological or radiological asset." Maya looked at the paper. It was a lie. A perfect, sanitized lie. "And the locals?" Maya asked. "The women in the village? Kasim?" The colonel cleared his throat. "The hostile combatant known as Kasim succumbed to his injuries en route to the staging area. Heart failure." Maya's hands clenched under the table. Heart failure. They had killed him. Or maybe the stress of leaving the tunnel had stopped his heart. Either way, the dead man's switch was broken. "And the radiation?" Maya pressed. "I have the logs from my Geiger counter. I have the readings." "Equipment malfunction," the civilian said smoothly. "Sand in the sensors. Common issue with the older models." He tapped the paper. "This is a non-disclosure agreement, Sergeant. Classified top secret SCI. If you sign it, you get a commendation medal for saving Captain Miller. You get your choice of next duty station. If you don't sign it, we open an investigation into your decision to disobey a direct order from Lieutenant Hatcher to collapse the tunnel. We look into your collaboration with an enemy combatant. We look into your mental health." Maya looked at the colonel. He wouldn't meet her eyes. He was a soldier, but he was defeated by the system long ago. She thought about the blue wire. Before she had climbed out of the vent, she had done one last thing. She had taken the data chip from her Geiger counter, the one recording the specific isotopic signature of the US-made Cobalt-60, and she had taped it to the inside of her boot sole. They had confiscated her gear, but they hadn't checked inside the rubber of her boots before giving her hospital slippers. The chip was currently taped behind the toilet tank in the base transient barracks. If she signed, she lived. She stayed in the fight. She kept the chip as insurance. If she refused, she went to Leavenworth. The chip would be found and destroyed. The truth would die with her career. The village. Maya said softly. What happens to the village? The area has been designated a hazardous training zone, the civilian said. The population is being relocated, compensated. They will be fine. Another lie. But it was the best she could get. Maya picked up the pen. The weight of it felt heavier than the EOD suit. This was the moral injury. This was the wound that wouldn't bleed but would never heal. She was becoming part of the cover-up. She was burying the tomb again. She signed, Sergeant Maya Lin. Smart choice, the civilian said, snatching the paper away. You're a hell of a tech, Lin. We need people who can keep their heads. I'm sure, Maya said. She stood up. She walked to the door. Sergeant, the colonel called out. Captain Miller recommended you for the Bronze Star. He said you took initiative. Maya paused. Miller had bought her silence with a medal. Or maybe it was his way of saying sorry. Thank him for me, sir, she said flatly. She walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed. She felt cold. Later that night, in the barracks, she retrieved the chip. She didn't upload it to the internet. She didn't send it to the press. She put it in a small, waterproof capsule and hung it around her neck, tucked under her dog tags. It sat against her skin, cold and hard. A reminder. She wasn't just a soldier anymore. She was a keeper of secrets. She was a silent professional. Maya stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes looked older. The young woman who wanted to prove herself was gone. In her place was someone dangerous, someone who knew where the bodies were buried. She turned off the light. The room went black, but in the silence she could still hear the phantom ticking of the clock. Click, click, click. Staff Sergeant Maya Lin sat in the corner of a crowded coffee shop, her back against the wall. To the casual observer, she was just another student or young professional working late. She wore a gray hoodie, jeans, and headphones that weren't playing music. They were noise-canceling, set to transparency mode, amplifying the conversations around her. On the table sat a battered laptop. It wasn't hers. She had bought it with cash 2 hours ago at a pawn shop in Anacostia. Click, click, click. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, not with the frantic energy of a hacker in a movie, but with the deliberate rhythmic precision of an EOD tech defusing a circuit. On the screen, a progress bar crawled forward. Uploading package Cobalt DAT encrypted destination, decentralized server node, Relay 4. She wasn't leaking the files, not yet. She was burying them again, but this time in a grave she controlled. She was building a digital dead man switch, just like Kasim's heart monitor. If she didn't log in every 30 days to reset the counter, the encryption key would automatically email itself to 20 major news outlets and international watchdog groups. She touched her chest, feeling the hard outline of the physical chip taped beneath her shirt. It was a talisman, a curse. She glanced up. Through the rain-streaked window, she watched the street. A black sedan was parked across the road. It had been there for 45 minutes. 2 men inside, engine running, no lights. Standard surveillance, she whispered to herself. She didn't panic. Panic was for people who hadn't listened to a nuclear core melting down 5 feet away from them. She looked at the laptop screen. Upload complete. Maya pulled a USB drive from the port. She didn't shut the computer down. She simply closed the lid, leaving it there. She stood up, sliding the USB drive into a Faraday bag, a small pouch lined with metallic mesh designed to block all radio signals, and shoved it into her pocket. She walked toward the rear exit. As she passed the counter, She saw the barista looking at the black sedan outside. The barista frowned, wiping a glass. "They've been sitting there a while," the barista muttered. "Waiting for a parking spot," Maya said. Her voice was different now. Deeper, hollower. It was the voice of someone who had left a part of herself underground. She pushed through the back door into the alley. The rain hit her instantly, soaking her hoodie. She didn't run. Running attracted attention. She walked with a measured pace, counting her steps. 1, 2, 3. She turned the corner, merging into the evening foot traffic of M Street. She checked her reflection in a shop window. The sedan hadn't moved yet. They were waiting for her to come out the front. Maya blended into the crowd. She wasn't the canary anymore. She wasn't the diversity hire. She was a ghost. She reached into her pocket and gripped the Faraday bag. She remembered Kasim's last words before the helicopter took him. "The mountain does not forget." "Neither do I," she whispered. She disappeared into the metro station, the sound of the train swallowing her footsteps, leaving the rain and the spies behind. The war was over, but the silence had just begun.